Thoughtful, articulate, artist gifted, grammatical. Circular sources brimming with rich, flammable. Food for your thoughts, plated a different animal. Rounds on me, keep tabs, we insurmountable. Swerve, hey, Merle.
Hey everybody, welcome to another What's on Your Mind Tuesday. My lives where I talk about mental health issues with different experts and people with lived experiences. It's been Black History Month, so I've been doing a special series on Black mental health specifically. So I'm so excited. This is the last Tuesday of the month, and we're going to be talking about Black love. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for joining me.
Of course. No, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes, this should be a great conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
For those joining who may not know me, I'm Nimade, and I was just saying I do these mental health lives every Tuesday night on different topics around mental health with different guests. And today I have Latoya, the therapist. Do you want to introduce yourself, tell everybody a little bit about you?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Latoya. I am a licensed professional counselor based in Arlington, Texas. I specialize in treating individuals with depression and anxiety, and then I also work with couples. I have my own practice, and you can really just find me on my corner of the internet, LatoyaTheTherapist.com. I also wrote a book a few years ago called The Wife's Guide to Beating the Side Chick. And I mean, you know, the name can be a little off-putting, but it's really just my love letter to wives. Like, we go through a lot. We're expected to do a lot and be on all the time. And so it's just my love letter to wives.
I love that. And that's part of why I reached out to you, because I wanted to talk about love. And, you know, we all know love is love, no matter what form it comes in. But especially since it's Black History Month, we want to talk about Black love specifically. So one thing I wanted to ask you, because I posted a video of you and your husband the other day. It was a really cute reel. If you could create a definition of Black love based on your own love, what would that definition be?
I would say, magical and resilient. I think that we go through so much just being Black in America, and I obviously live in America, so I'm gonna speak to that experience. But I think we go through so much being Black and living in America, and then still being able to come home and pour into one another and love on each other, and raise these kids that are sometimes chaotic. Just magical and resilient. That's how I would define it.
I love that. I think that those are really great words, because it definitely speaks to what you need to help have that relationship. So one of the things I wanted to talk about too was like, let's start and work our way through that relationship. So starting the relationship. Some of us are still in the dating phases. As far as getting, because something that I find hard, right, in dating is really getting people to open up. I think it's hard overall. You know, people don't really necessarily like to be vulnerable, but I think especially in this society, Black men are very much like, we keep it all on our shoulders, we keep it all to ourselves. So what are some advice, like if you're working with a couple, that you would have on both sides of it? So first on the side of getting the guy to open up and be more vulnerable, and then also tips on helping the woman to create that open space for him.
Sure. So being vulnerable is just like willingly taking an emotional risk, because you never know how the other person is going to respond. And so that's scary. And so in a session, I always want to validate and name that, because a lot of times we think that people are being closed on purpose, or they're not that into me, or something like that. And that's not the case. It's just really, really scary to be open, because you don't know how the other person is going to respond. So I always want to name and validate that. But then I tell people, start small. You don't meet someone and you're dating and you're like, hey, this is every single trauma I've ever been through, and this is what I got going on. You got to baby step your way in. So assuming that they've made it to the relationship part, and let's say they're coming to see me, I would say, what's the holdback? What are you afraid of? What do you think is going to happen? And so kind of exploring what the fear is specifically in that relationship to opening up. Because there's been an incident where he opened up and it wasn't well received, you know? Which takes to that second part of that question, how do you create that safe space? I think you have to listen first. A lot of times we're always listening to jab back, or we're listening to respond, and we're not really hearing the whole thing. We're just like, you said what? oh no, I don't like that, or you know what I mean? And so always listening to the whole thing and then not judging. Asking for clarity is the best way to create that safe space. So you want to listen all the way through. You want to come from a non-judgmental place, and then you want to ask for clarity in case you misunderstood something, and not just assume that whatever they're sharing with you is a personal attack on you, because that seems to be where the conflict is.
Yes, and I feel like, so I'm obsessed with reality TV, so
Me-
I live my life through watching what they go through, and I've noticed a lot of times that often what the person is saying and what the other person is hearing are two different things.
Absolutely.
And so that leads to like a lot of conflict. So I noticed like one couple I was watching, they were a therapist, and they said like, what did you hear that person say? And the more I watch stuff, the more I'm like, I think that needs to be part of everyone's conversation, because people are really off with that, what the person said versus what they heard.
I always tell my couples, ask for clarity, because when we're in a session, I can hear, whether it be the man or the woman, or if they're in the same sex relationship, whoever it is, I can hear when one person says something and I know it didn't land well with the other person in their body language. And so what I want the person who heard it is, when you feel that change in your body language, ask for clarity. Because when you feel that change, your natural reaction is to get defensive. But why?
Yeah.
This is your partner. This is the person you said you love. This is the person you said you want to be with. You trust them. You love them. So y'all are on a battlefield. This is the partnership. So when you feel that, it's like, okay, feel it, acknowledge it, ask for clarity. But to the other person, I say, when you say something to your partner and you notice a shift in body language, or they blink too much, or they sit back, everyone has their head, ask them, like, what'd you hear me say? Because I think we're about to have a disconnect. If both people are hyper aware of it, if both people are on guard to look out for the disconnect, hopefully we can get on the right track and get back connected and aligned in what's really being said. So I like to teach the person, like, feel it and ask. But I also like to say, when you're talking and you're sharing, pay attention to who you're talking to, so that you can see when the shift happens, so that you can say, hold on, I think you may have misunderstood me, and go from there.
Yeah, because there are some of us who wear it on our face. Like, you can see on our face what we're thinking and feeling. Someone said, listen to to understand and not to respond. And someone else said that dating right now is, in these times, are weird, which is absolutely true. It's so hard, and it's interesting because I feel like, because there aren't as many constraints on us and like what we have to do to be perceived a certain way, you would almost think it'd be easier, or at least my naive mind thinks it'd be easier, because people can just say what they want. There's less of a need to play the games. Like, if I'm on, like a dating app and I'm like, well, I'm looking for a friendship, or I'm looking for a relationship, or I'm looking for hookups, like whatever I say, like, people should be able to go with that. But you still have the people out there who are trying to scheme their way in by saying they're looking for relationships when they're not really. It's like, well, why don't you just look for the other people who aren't looking for connections? But I think it's because we also have like this thing in our society where, like, you want the person who is looking for a relationship even if you don't want a relationship, because they're good, like the whole double standard.
Right. I think it's because to say I'm looking for a hookup, especially if you're a woman, I think it's still a little bit taboo, right? I think people are still kind of judgmental about that. And so using the guise of like, I want a relationship, it's sneaky, and I don't think people should do it. And I'm with you. I think we should all just be honest and upfront about what we want. But I think that there's that societal pressure to say that you want the relationship. You know what I mean? I don't think that as evolved as we are, I don't think we've come to a place to where saying, nope, just trying to have sex, just trying to smash. I don't think we've come to a place to where that's truly accepted.
Yeah, especially for women, which can make it harder as well, because then sometimes you have where women will get into situations where, like, I'm just going to say I'm okay with a hookup, and then they catch feelings, and then they have to try to navigate through that. So I'm sure you've had some experience with that as well with clients. How do you help them, I guess it depends on what they want, right? To disengage from it, or to try to transition over. Like, what do you give advice like that to someone in that situation?
So what we do as women, we'll fall in love with the fairy tale. We want a relationship. They want to hook up. The hookup is great. The conversation leading up to the hookup is great. And so we've created this happily ever after in our mind. And I teach my clients, you have got to be mindful. You've got to stay in the present. You've got to focus on the facts. The facts are, you are not meeting his friends. You are not meeting his family. He said he did not want a relationship. You need to anchor on what's actually happening and not what you think could maybe possibly potentially one day in the future happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that piece. But then just navigating through it, I ask, like, do you just want the hookup or are you really looking for a relationship? Because the thing is, people hold space. And so if you're just hooking up, that person is still holding space where the person who you actually want to date and marry and be with, they can't get there because the space is full. So you have
Right.
to.
Yep.
And if it's just a hookup, I tell my clients, listen, if that's what you want, go get it. As long as you are doing it with another grown, consenting adult, I'm good with it. But don't lie to me and don't lie to yourself. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if you want
Yeah.
something different, this is not going to turn into something different. There are like 1 in a million where my homegirl know a homegirl knows a homegirl where the hookup turned into a marriage. That's
Right.
not really, like, the odds aren't in your favor for that.
Right. Absolutely. Something that I do that I've actually worked on personally to get past is dating people's potential, right? So you start dating someone and they're like, oh, all these things are good except for this one thing, which like they'll probably change or work on or, maneuver. And I think that it's a trap a lot of us fall into, especially if the guy pretends like the guy or girl pretends like they're on board with changing that one thing. What's a good way to avoid that? Because there is, like, people do have things they want to improve about themselves, things they want to change. And if they express that what they want to change is in line with the one thing that you're like, well, I don't really like this, then, like, I think it's easier to be like, okay, well, we can date because he wants to change this thing and I want it to change and it'll be fine. Then 4 years later, nothing's changed and you've wasted years. So, like, where's that line, or how do you maneuver that line between being supportive of someone who wants to grow and change, but also not falling into the trap of dating someone's potential?
Sure. So I think that real change, first of all, is slow and it's hard. And you don't go to sleep one person and then wake up a whole new person who has it all together. That doesn't happen, right? And so how you know someone wants to change is there's consistent accountability and behavior changes, right? People are going to relapse. People are going to fall off the wagon. People are going to revert back to old patterns and old behaviors because that's what you do in times of stress. Like, that's what you know. But when they revert back, are they like, ooh, I was trying not to do that. I'm so sorry. That was my bad. I slipped up. Or are they like, we chilling? And then how long, right? So, okay, so let me give you a concrete example. So me personally, back in the day, I may have been a bit spicy in arguments, okay? I might have been someone who wanted to, like, pop off. My husband hates that. He is not about that. He is very clear that I'm not going to disrespect him, right? So it doesn't happen overnight. You don't have an argument and suddenly are, like, controlling every single word that comes out of your mouth. But it's those moments of argument where I'm able to be like, give me a minute. Once you see me trying, that's something that you can stick with. But if every time we're upset, I'm like, let me tell you, and I'm popping off and there's no change, then there's no change.
Right.
And so sometimes we have to really look at time. And I teach my clients time frame. He said he wanted, or she said they wanted to work on this. In 30 days, what's the progress? Some things you won't see in 30 days because you won't see the bad behavior until it's triggered. Okay, so 60 to 90 days. If you haven't seen it in 60 to 90 days, let's keep going. But if in 60 to 90 days, there's been no accountability, there's been no effort, there's been no catching themselves, there's been nothing, you get to decide. Now it's your choice. Now you're choosing this. You're choosing to be with this person because they said this is what they wanted. And a lot of times people will say, I want to change this. I want to be better. I want to learn, because it's performative. It sounds good. They don't really want to change. It's easy to be who you are, right? It's really, really easy to get stuck and stagnant and be who you've always been. That's why people say, well, it's just how I am. Because that's easy. The change is hard.
Yeah, absolutely. It froze for a second. So one of the things that's hard, and I love that you mentioned as well that you're spicy. One of the things that's hard to change is dealing with conflict. Some people, first of all, people deal with it differently. I shut down. I don't want to talk until I can calm down. I want to wait until I can have a rational conversation. I don't do well with being yelled at, and some people are yellers. And so I just want to get your tips for dealing with conflict in a healthy way, but also for how you deal with other people's way of dealing with conflict. Because, like, for example, I said I like it quiet, I need a moment, but that can sometimes make someone who wants to deal with things right away feel like their needs aren't being met because I don't want to address it at that moment. So how do you deal with having different conflict resolution styles, and then what are some healthy tips for conflict resolution?
So you deal with it by having a conversation when you're not in conflict. So let's pretend you had the conflict on Monday and we're going to work through it. So this conversation that you have about, hey, on Monday you were yelling. I don't really respond to that. I'm more of a person who, I need to take a minute. And then the person says, well, no, I like to dive right in. Where's the compromise? You have to then compromise on, okay, well, what does that look like? Do I give you 30 minutes? And then that also gives me 30 minutes to bring my volume down, take some deep breaths, make sure I'm not yelling, but I still need to talk about this. So I think you have to be vulnerable enough to say, when you yell at me, I shut down. Or that person has to be vulnerable enough to say, when you shut down, it makes me yell more, and then I shut down. So you have to have the conversation while you're not in conflict. And then figure out the middle. So no, they can't yell at you because that's not respectful. But then also, you can't shut down for days. How long do you need to process? And what are you going to do to speed up your processing speed so that you got your time to process, but then they also got to talk about it before going to sleep? And so I think that looks really, really different with every relationship and every couple, because some people are like, team, don't go to bed mad. They might die in their sleep. And then you're going to be sad for the rest of your life. Some people are like, no, I need to go to sleep so nothing bad happens and we can talk about it in the morning. I think it's very unique to each relationship.
Yeah, that's true. Because I'm definitely team, like, let me calm down. Because I'll say things that will hurt your feelings. And it's also because I know how sensitive I am. And, like, as much as I'm forgiving, I also will remember every mean thing you say to me. So I prefer that we just calm down so we can have a rational conversation and we're not saying, like, hurtful things, because that will take me even longer to get over than whatever the initial issue was.
And I think each situation is different, right? Like, some things you need to process for 30 minutes. Some things you need to process for an hour. I think the gravity of the situation or how big the conflict is can also determine that time frame.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some tips that you give to couples for resolving conflict? Just in a healthy way.
Conflict daily. Every day, resolve it. And they're like, no, it feels like we're arguing every day. It feels like that in the beginning, but it gets better because you want to resolve conflict daily, because if you don't, something happens Monday, you let it go. Something happens Tuesday, you let it go. Wednesday, let it go. Thursday, you are screaming mad, foaming at the mouth, and the other person is like, I just left the toilet seat up. Like, aren't you? Like, you know what I mean? You're not mad about that one thing. You're mad about all the things. So resolve conflict daily. Know your trigger points and how you're going to manage them. So you're a person who shuts down. How are you going to manage not shutting down in the moment? I'm a person who gets spicy. How am I going to control my tongue? How am I going to work through that? And then take a time out, and not a time out to, like, call your homegirl and be like, girl, this is what he did. But like a 3 to 5 minute time out, breathe, gather your thoughts, and then come back in. But you have to, like, complete the conversation so that there's a solution. Can't just leave it in the air. What's the solution? And then how do we not get back here again? What's the compromise? It's a lot of compromise.
It's a lot of different moving parts. Just to keep that. But I think that that's really important in a relationship, is figuring how, because I mean, of course we all want, like, love is wonderful and love is great and no problems, but that's not realistic. So learning how to deal with the conflict and how to come back from it as well, to get things back to normal, because that's always a hard part for me. I think it's also why I, for the longest, tried very hard not to have conflicts. I don't like it in general, because I know it takes longer for me to get back. Like, even when we get to the, okay, I forgive you, like, my mind is still, like, lingering on what I was upset about. It takes me a little while to get over it. even if in theory I'm okay.
Yeah. I think it's a mindset thing as far as like, what are we doing with this relationship? Is this sock on the floor not in the laundry basket enough to have me upset at my partner for a week? Is this we disagreed on how we were going to raise the children enough that we got to be mad and not speaking to each other?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
it's intentional about that conversation, right? Like being intentional about trying to get back into the flow and not just hoping time will pass and you'll get back in. So like at my house, we call it the love bubble. And so it's like you have to be intentional about getting back into the love bubble once something has happened and you got out. Because if not, you could just stay out.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think that you made a great point about addressing things daily or, as they happen. So I think part of why it takes me longer to get over stuff is because I do, in my mind, I'm not purposely letting it build, but I'll be like, well, that's not a big enough thing to have an argument about or to create an issue about, so I'll let it go. And then this isn't anything, so I let it go. So then when it does get to something where I'm like, this is a problem, like I expect it to be like really addressed or like whatever. And then when it's not, I get even more upset. But that's because I realize in my mind, I've been backtracking all the little things I've let go. So that way I want this thing, since I'm finally bringing it to your attention, to be a big thing. But that person isn't clocking all the little things that I let go along the way. They were just, so to them, it's just this random blow up over this random thing. So I think your point about making sure to address things along the way is helpful in that type of situation.
And I think that sometimes when we hear like resolve conflict daily, I think people think like we're going to be arguing about every single thing. And it's not that. You just mentioned, ooh, I don't really like when this happens, or could you try not to yell at me like that? Or maybe we should try this a different way. It doesn't have to be like this long drawn out conversation. It doesn't have to be an argument. It could just be, I notice we're not aligned here. Can we kind of work through that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. And then I know, like I mentioned earlier, love is love, but with the focus on Black History Month and Black love, something that really is something that we especially have to deal with is the impact of race outside of the home, right? Like there's all of the microaggressions and all of like just the little ways, big and small, that we have, the weight that we carry on our shoulder when we're in different environments, whether it's predominantly Black environment or you're the only white Black face in a white environment. There's so many things that we all have to deal with that are kind of specific to our race, that a partner who shares those same things would be more understanding of, hopefully, because they have to deal with it as well. But what's the way that we can help our partners in those situations, or when they come to us dealing with those types of things, like where we can, I guess, be their safe space, their sanctity from dealing with the pressures of being like the strong Black woman and the tough Black man outside of the home?
I think you listen fully, let them get it all out before you start saying amen and this happened to me at work too and I just experienced this yesterday. Let them get it out fully, validate what they're saying, ask questions to show support, and then ask them like, what do you need to feel supported in this moment? And then do it. So let's say the person says, well, I don't know what I need. I just kind of wanted to get it out. Okay, cool. But then there's something that this person likes. Do that. So I'm an acts of service person. If I had a stressful day, get these kids. You know what I mean? I don't want to do it. So
Yeah.
It comes down to kind of like knowing your partner. So I always say ask how a person wants to be supported, because it can change. How I want to be supported based on racial microaggressions versus how I want to be supported if I've had conflict with my homegirl is going to be different for me. Could be the same for someone else. So that's why I always lean on the side of asking, but then also paying attention. Okay, your partner had a hard day. You're going to listen fully. You're going to ask questions. You're going to validate. But then what can you do to make them smile? What can you do to be a bright spot? That's what it is to be a safe space. You're not going to come into the conversation judgmental, but when the conversation ends, what are you going to do to pick them up? And no, their mood is not your responsibility. Their happiness is not your responsibility. But it's also important to show them, I heard you. I see you. You had an awful day. I'm going to do this thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that bringing them back to that joy is huge, right? Because when you're down from outside, you want to come back into that joy.
Right.
I did want to ask you also, though, about a little bit more about your book as well. What was the title of it and the main premise of it?
So the title of the book is The Wife's Guide to Beating the Side Chick. And the premise of it is I'm talking about everything wife, from like communication to sex to submission, all the things, right? And so the premise is we're going to do all of this to make sure that our job as a wife is done. So this is what it looks like. But I also talk about self-care, right? Because you can't really pour out until you've poured in. So the premise is this work is hard, but you are equipped for it. And here are some tips.
And something else I wanted to ask you as well, too. So, because you mentioned submission also, and that definitely plays a role in a lot of relationships, as far as like the way they've been brought up and the hierarchy of like the man, the woman, and who submits. But I find that sometimes in those types of roles, the problem isn't so much like the need for the traditional hierarchy of the relationship. It's that the man doesn't respect the woman as much in her role because it's seen as a lesser role. So like, how do you get that respect that, you know, like, yes, you're the hand, you know, the head, however you individually might view your relationship. Like you're the head and I'm the neck, or, you know, I submit as a wife to a husband, but still maintain that level of respect. Like, because it's not, I think a lot of people think of submission as like, oh, I'm just going to do what you say all the time. But I think in a marriage, you can still have that submission while having that equality.
So submission doesn't mean you don't have a say. It doesn't mean passive. It doesn't mean you're out here voicing your opinions and he's just like, That's not submission. That's something else, and probably seek help if that's what you're dealing with. But more submission is more so at the end of the day, because he's responsible for the house, like the house is on his back, he has the final say. So let me say it this way. If my lights get cut off right now, nobody's gonna be like, well, what was Toya doing? The very first thing they'll say is, where her husband at?
Yeah.
If I get a flat tire and I'm on the highway for 3 hours, what they gonna say? Where her husband? So if he's responsible for that, then he gets the final say as to how it will go so that he's comfortable with leading. But the caveat to that is you got to be following somebody that you trust to lead you. And I talk about that in the book too. Like, I'm not going to let you lead us off a cliff. Now, we're not going to do that. But I think you have to be with somebody that you know is not going to take you off the cliff.
Yeah. I think that that's huge. And I think that there are so many people who hear that, like the man should be the lead, the man should be the head. And they think like, because I'm a man, I'm the lead and I'm the head. And it's like, well, no, buddy, like you have to earn that. Like you can't just say like, because I wear pants, I'm going to have the lead. Because even like the most like powerful, strong, independent, fierce female, like they still like having a partner in that way and someone that they can lean on, but it's just, they take less crap. So you really, truly have to embody a leadership in a way, like you said, that makes the person feel comfortable trusting you to lead.
Yeah. Like I have to feel safe in knowing that if I voice my opinion and our opinions differ, I have to feel safe with whatever it is that you've given me to know that, okay, I disagree, but this is what we're doing. You know what I mean? And how do I feel? Well, there has to be like, for me, there has to have been like a track record of good decisions, even when we disagree. You got to show me that like me, you have my best interest at heart no matter what. Even if I think we should turn left and you think we should turn right, I got to know that when we turn right, we're not going to fall off the cliff. There's still road ahead, right? And that comes from being with somebody that you trust with your life, that you trust to lead you. And so that's a lot of responsibility on him too, because you got to be that person. Like I'm no dummy. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I talk to people all day. I'm always looking at, well, what's going on? Well, what you think? What's next? You know what I mean? Like, so you got to be someone who's worthy of being followed and not just like you said, because you wear pants.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, you know, I'm not mentioned, but the title is Defeating the Side Chick. Let's talk about side chicks for a minute because they're a problem. How do you navigate that in a relationship where, well, I guess it's two parts, right? So we'll tackle the first one, which is where there's an active side chick and or like dealing with relationships. I feel like a lot of times the women know, like they know, and they just, is it that they pretend not to know for their own feelings? Wouldn't it be better to just acknowledge it, or are they afraid